Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for being with us today, in honor especially of World Food Day. My name is Lisa Moon, and I am the president and CEO of the Global Food Banking Network. World Food Day has been commemorated by the United Nations for many years now as a moment for the entire international community to come together and both recognize and forge new commitments to tackling the tragic challenge of hunger facing the world. And especially in 2020, World Food Day is a very important moment for the Global Food Banking Network and for billions around the world that are struggling daily to access enough food. Since the pandemic began, food banking organizations have been on the front lines providing vital relief to families and individuals facing hunger. And today we are so grateful to be together with all of you to dive into this essential work. Many of you I know have been partners and supporters of GFN and food banks in your communities during these difficult times, and we cannot thank you enough because without you, our work would not be possible. Today, we want to talk first and foremost about a new study that the Global Food Banking Network, or GFN as we call for short, has released that gives a landscape of food bank operations worldwide. But then, after a brief set of comments from myself, we're going to move to the bulk of our conversation today, which is with colleagues that are leading food banks in 4 countries around the world who are joining us from virtually all time zones and are looking forward to discussing with you about what they're seeing on the ground in their communities. How has hunger affected their communities during this time of the pandemic? How has it affected their ability to source the types of nutritious food that families need? What are they seeing related to schools where many children are having to continue to work remotely and are not able to access meals at school? And talk about how they have creatively and frankly heroically adapted their supply chains and distribution models to meet surging demand in their communities. This session is being offered in both English and Spanish, and I ask that you please select your preferred language by using the interpretation button below. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to pop into the chat, and one of our administrators here will be able to make sure that you get on in the right language. Before, though, we move to the bulk of our program and talking directly to the food bank leaders that have been doing this hunger relief work, I want to talk for a moment about the state of global food banking, which is a publication that GFN released today, the third of its edition. It maps major food banking networks worldwide, and we were very fortunate to work with our partners, Feeding America and the European Food Banks Federation, to put it together to give you all a sense of what this food banking movement looks like on an international scale. So just one moment, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that? If you can't, please let me know in the comments. So to dive right in, this year also marked the first day of International Food Loss and Waste. And with that, GFN evolved its publication and we released it in 2 parts. So on September 29th, approximately 2 weeks ago, what we did is try to look at how food banks worldwide were collectively contributing to a global social and environmental impact. That publication, which is available on our website and also can be found in the materials for today's session, really details kind of the macro level impact of food banking operations that are occurring in more than 60 countries and in thousands of communities. It concluded that in terms of environmental impact, specifically that food banks diverted 3.75 million metric tons of nutritious surplus food from landfill to go to address food insecurity in their communities. This ultimately amounted to approximately 12.39 billion kilograms of greenhouse gases being prevented. It's quite a large number, but it really brought it into perspective for me when my colleague told me that this was the equivalent of removing all cars from Paris, Singapore, and Sao Paulo from the roads. And potentially very important, always, but during the COVID pandemic, is that collectively food banking organizations served by our organization, GFN, with our partners Feeding America and the European Food Banks Federation, provided meals to 66.5 million people facing hunger. Now, these numbers really come from a pre-pandemic time, as well as the State of Global Food Banking, which was released today. But our team has gone the extra mile to also give those that are reviewing the publication a sense of what has happened during this COVID time. So the State of Global Food Banking, which again, we've released for a couple of years now, actually looks quite different than it has in years past, mainly because food banking around the world has changed. This year publication features food bank profiles from 14 new countries. The majority of those are actually located in Southeast Asia and in India, where the food banking movement has quite picked up. We have new partners in those regions that are regularly strengthening communities and are doing absolutely incredible and very exciting work. And you'll hear from one of them today. Our colleague Astrid from Indonesia joins us, and we'll look forward to talking with you about what she's seeing in her community. The other notable change too is that the partnerships that GFN has in sub-Saharan Africa are also strengthening. John who's based in Nairobi, he and several other colleagues predominantly based in major urban areas of sub-Saharan Africa are doing incredibly innovative and creative things to address hunger in these communities. You know, as always with food banking, what we are most excited about is that these organizations are locally led, locally launched, and they represent a community's commitment to fighting hunger. And so these are assets that communities will have long-term to address food insecurity needs. And we're very excited about the strength and the expansion of this model worldwide. Especially during this time, I know this will be of no new news, to everyone joining today, that in 2020, there's incredible challenges to food insecurity. A report put out by the United Nations a few weeks ago affirmed that even before the pandemic, 1 in 4 people faced food insecurity worldwide. And of that number, 690 million faced chronic hunger, which means they were struggling daily to access enough food to even meet basic energy needs. They are now projecting that 690 million number could increase by anywhere between 80 to 131 million people because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also know that food insecurity rates have changed. However, the exact magnitude of that needs to be studied in more detail. We, of course, know that those living in poverty are disproportionately affected. The International Labor Organization estimates that only 1 in 2 people globally, so 50% of the world population, has access to social protection. And so for many people, turning to a food bank or to a similar feeding organization is one of the only places that they can access food without the support of any social safety nets. And even now, more than 6 months into the pandemic, we have 800 million children learning remotely or being still out of school. And as many people know, that many children in food insecure households count on accessing meals at school as one of their major sources of nutrition. So food banks have been on the front lines since day one, struggling to meet demand with limited resources and capacity. GFN has been doing a number of pulse surveys throughout the pandemic, and I just want to thank all of our partners that we work with for updating us most recently. And some of the results of our most recent pulse survey are here. As you can see, that there is still a significant increase in requests for food assistance. About half of the food banks that we serve are seeing increases of more than 50% as well, even now, 7 months into the pandemic. 81% of our partners report that they are still operating under significant restrictions due to public health. This could be closures. It also could be movement restrictions. Natasha, who runs an amazing network of food banks in Argentina, can speak specifically to this, quite possibly one of the longest quarantines in the world. Even today, there's still not commercial air travel permitted in Argentina. 80% of the food banks that we serve report that they are providing food to more beneficiary agencies and local charities during this crisis, and 89% report that social protections to address food access and other concerns are still insufficient. We did a calculation really about how much food banks in terms of those served by GFN had surged during the COVID-19 crisis, and found that that our network had actually expanded service to 5 million additional people facing hunger in the first 3 months of COVID-19. And so even in spite of incredible economic hardship, very thin resource bases, food banks continue to step up and innovate and provide vital support to many people in their communities during this time. This just gives you a snapshot of the Global Food Banking Network's impact itself. And I'm providing this as context because I'm going to show you a bit about how we're profiling each food bank partner in the publication that was released today. So in 2019, the Global Food Banking Network members served 16.9 million people. They distributed the equivalent of approximately 1.4 billion meals, supported 56,000 social service agencies or beneficiary agencies, and we are fortunate to support partners in 44 countries, the majority of which are in emerging and developing markets. And as I just mentioned, that number of 16.9 million people actually surged to approximately 22 million during the COVID response. So when you go to the State of Global Food Banking, it's all digital, of course, and we hope that you're able to check it out over the course of today or sometime soon. You're going to see that each of our food bank partners has a profile, because we really want you to see how the incredible partners that we have are laddering up to this global impact. And so you'll see here an example of the profile for Mesa Brazil, which is our partner obviously in Brazil. And you can see that we provide some demographic data on the country. So what are the population characteristics? What are the development indicators? What are economic indicators? And then a bit about what exactly the food bank does itself. And in terms of its reach, how many bricks and mortar operations it has, what types of charities is it supporting. And then we also include at the bottom here, you'll see there's a COVID-19 note. We want to give you a sense of how Mesa Brazil has been responding during the COVID-19 crisis. And so with this, we hope this gives you just some color in terms of how different organizations are worldwide in terms of tackling hunger, and how they're uniquely adapting during these very difficult times.